This is News 24 Live. I'm Erin Bates. It's just days after President Jacob Zuma's question and answer session in the National Assembly that degraded into a bit of a spat between MPs and security in Parliament. I'm sitting down with the Chief Whip of the DA, John Steenhuisen, and we're going to get that party's response to what happened in Parliament. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for having us. It's great to be here with you. I think the starting point has to be that our Parliament is fundamentally broken. And what we're seeing now is symptoms of that broken Parliament. We have a President who's shown absolute disrespect for Parliament. We have a Speaker who refuses to allow members of Parliament to do their jobs properly, to hold the President accountable. So it's little wonder now that Parliament is spilling over into these chaotic scenes that we see here. The framers of the Constitution were very clear. Parliament should be the arena of executive accountability. And they, through various sections of the Constitution, empower Parliament with powers to hold the executive accountable. What we've seen over the last 2 decades is the ANC slowly pulling the teeth of Parliament's ability to hold the executive accountable, obviously as it's become more and more uncomfortable, to the situation where we've arrived at now, where the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, and bearing in mind we operate in a constitutional dispensation, has declared the President to have violated his oath of office, to have broken the law, and has seriously levelled allegations or findings against the National Assembly that it failed in its duty to hold the President and the Executive accountable. And so it can't simply be business as usual in Parliament. And so the scenes that we're seeing playing out in Parliament are symptomatic of a broken Parliament that needs to be fixed very urgently.
That's an interesting interpretation. I suppose there's some people who might say that what we've seen, as violent as it may be and as distressing as it may be, is in some ways a sign of a healthy democracy, that there is this contestation and there's clearly some fissures within the power structures of Parliament and the kind of sympathies that some people think the Speaker of Parliament has. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that is an incorrect view. I don't think it's healthy to see scenes like we're seeing played out in the National Assembly, particularly if one sees what's happening around the rest of the country, places like Vawani, where communities, instead of using channels and means to raise their concerns, are instead burning down schools. Now, when public infrastructure is broken and burnt down, it really deprives communities of any form of advancement, and it's also a massive drain on taxpayer funds as well that have got to now be ploughed into replacing that infrastructure. So I don't think that a Parliament should be setting an example for the rest of the country, that if you don't get your way or you don't get your point across, that you then resort to violence and destruction. So I think Parliaments by their very nature should be debating chambers where it's an arena of ideas where you win through the power of argument and persuasion, not through the flow of force. Because if that was the type of Parliament that we're to have, then it means that the winners will always be those who are the strongest or have the most advanced weaponry or are the most powerful. And I don't think that's a healthy debating chamber, a healthy arena to advance a multi-party democracy.
I think what we don't necessarily recognize is the power of the institution. If you look at the security who come in, for example, that's a kind of established power that Parliament has, whereas the MPs who are sitting in the benches, your party, for example, is in a different kind of position. You have a different language or currency of power, and it's when those two butt heads that things start to go awry. You spoke to me before the interview about some of the damage that was done. I mean, what we as the public will see is water bottles being thrown, a hard hat, which might do some damage, yes, but then the scuffle erupting and people being dragged out and retaliating and you know, a whole kind of, you know, mess of things going on. What is the other damage that has been done, or is it really just water bottles and a hard hat?
No, there's been some significant damage to the chamber. A number of fire extinguishers were pulled off the walls and used to spray members of the public and members of the Parliamentary Protection Services and all over the old Assembly chamber. Doors were ripped off their hinges, and significant damage was done to the poor taste entrance of Parliament, where you obviously saw those scenes of fire extinguishers being hurled through the plate glass windows, etc. I mean, there's been significant damage. There's also been, and I think this is a point that's been missed out as well, it's been significant assault on members of the parliamentary staff by members of the EFF as well. I mean, the scenes that have played out yesterday that have emerged of a woman Parliamentary Protection Service officer being held on the ground and kicked by EFF MPs and staff members. Now, you know, I don't think that violence of any form is a solution to the problems that we face in South Africa. We mustn't shy away from those problems. They are significant. I mean, we have 8.9 million South Africans who don't have work. We have an economy that's spiraling out of control. We've got a president who is not in the driving seat of driving growth in the country. And of course, we've got massive food price increases as a result of a devastating drought. These are the issues that should be being debated on a daily basis in the chamber. Instead, we're seeing these pitched battles. And points I think I'm trying to make.
So let's pick up on that point you've made about the conduct of MPs really not reflecting the needs of people on the ground, people who are under pressure because of the drought, people who have little access to work opportunities and so forth. We know historically South Africans' use of violence as a means of holding the state accountable or of expressing their discontent. And that's a historical fact, and it links to the administration that has now passed, thank goodness. But President Jacob Zuma also spoke about that culture of violence in the National Assembly on Tuesday. Is it not incredibly powerful to have MPs in workers' uniforms using a language of discontent that is so familiar to people on the ground, rather than sitting in blue suits and using rhetoric and argument to try and further the democracy and the democratic debate?
Well, I think that it's a fundamental question that the EFF need to ask themselves, because you can't be in Parliament and then all simultaneously be outside of Parliament. You've got to then do what Van Zyl Slabbert did. You need to then say, well, I don't recognise Parliament as a means to affect change in the country, and therefore I'm leaving Parliament and I will do extra parliamentary activities. I think it's fundamentally dishonest for the EFF members to draw salaries and perks and benefits as members of Parliament, but then say that they're going to break down the institution because they're not achieving what they want to achieve. They need to be honest then and give up those salaries and go and drive for change in communities on the ground and fight for perhaps a new dispensation or a new type of democracy. But I really think that we as MPs should be setting the tone for the rest of the country. And I think it would be unrealistic and unreasonable of us to say to communities, please don't resort to violence, don't resort to mob justice, don't resort to breaking down public and burning down public infrastructure when we are setting that type of tone in the National Assembly. I think we should be appealing to people's better natures and showing them through the way we behave that there is a way to resolve issues and there is a way to ensure that your voice is heard.